How's it going, everyone? It's Colin. I've been sitting around and thinking about the Zelda series. They haven't really done much to switch up the art style until the most recent games, or matter of fact, even the gameplay in that regard. Like, imagine if they took a more pirate route to the series, like Sea of Thieves clashing with Zelda. The Legend of Zelda, the Wind Waker. Probably the most odd entry in the Zelda franchise. Back when the GameCube was the hottest commodity on the market, okay, second hottest. Wow, okay, third. They showed off a tech demo featuring our hero Link facing off Mr. Ganondorf himself. This was a pretty realistic looking take at the time, and for the hardware, and had all fans and gamers alike hyped for the next entry in the Zelda franchise. Everyone was really ready for this gritty and realistic take that we hadn't necessarily gotten before. And in 2002, out popped The Legend of Zelda, the Wind Waker. Literally couldn't be anything further from that. In fact, the game that everyone was waiting for would finally be made 4 years later in 2006, titled The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. But nonetheless, Wind Waker wasn't really greatly received at the time because it wasn't exactly what the fans were looking for. But I will say, coming back to it in 2024 and playing it for the very first time, I had a blast. This game is just so fun. It has so much character and charm to it. Link is what I would like to call a goob. He's just so cartoony, and likewise, so is everything else in the world. The nice thing about making the decision to go with this art direction in the game is just how phenomenally it aged. Like, the looks and aesthetics hold up great from today's standards. And I just want to throw out real quick, I really like the opening theme to the game. Like, I'm no music guy or whatever, but this theme just gets you ready and filled with energy for the journey you're about to embark on. I did want to mention, I did play the GameCube release and not the Wii U remake. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I ain't no bitch, I play the original version. But in all seriousness, the Wii U remaster did bring some quality of life improvements that weren't in the original. Therefore, I could bring up some problems that were solved in that version of the game. That's what I get for having to play the original take on it. But a good place to probably kick this off would be a brief overlook of the story. Lincoln's an island boy who lives with his sister and his grandma. Where are his parents, you may ask? Fuck if I know, they don't talk about it. I just woke up in a crow's nest with a fresh lobster shirt on with my little sister bitching at me, telling me to go say hi to grandma on my birthday. So yeah, it's Link's birthday. And because of the Hero of Time, every kid when they turn 10, as like some ritual, has to put on that green getup. A little weird, I may add, but I guess it's one way to get our boy Link looking pretty familiar here. But after this, a big bird brings a girl named Tetra and dumps her right in the middle of the forest on Outset Island. Link goes to save her and does succeed, but as the bird circles back around, it mistakes Link's little sister for Tetra and kidnaps her instead. And now our hero Link has a motive. He's got to save his sister. He pulls up his little tights, steals a shield from Grandma, and runs for the open seas. Grandma's in shambles, like, she is so sad. She is struggling. And may I mention that Tetra is like way too hesitant to help Link, even though this is like all of her fault. She don't give a single shit that your sister was taken, even though she is the sole reason it all happened. But once you get to that Forsaken Fortress, Link gets clapped by that bird after finally seeing his sister and tossed in the ocean, where a talking boat will save you. And thank God this boat is not near annoying as Navi. You'll find a sail on Windfall Island and start sailing on over to the island of the Rito. You steal this orb from their prince. Well, he gives it to you after you like save their land or whatever. But this is a Pearl of the Gods. And you learn that these are pretty important since they like open up the Tower of the Gods to your access. And after this, you go say hi to the Forest Children, the Koroks, which I may add look way fucking different than they ever have before. Like, what are these? I mean, it's how they look now in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom too, but what happened to like the humanoid people? What happened to the children that just never grew up? Why are they this now? Who knows? But you get another orb from completing the Forbidden Woods there, and then you take off for the third one, which is on Outset Island. And you literally just blow up a wall, and a fish water spirit gives it to you. You'll set the 3 orbs in their place, and next thing you know, you're at the Tower of the Gods. You climb up this tower doing a bunch of puzzles here and there, and, well, you open the gates to the land below, which was Hyrule Castle. Down here underwater, this is where the King of Red Lions now reveals himself to be the King Bosphoramus of Hyrule. You unsheath that Master Sword and you head your way right back to Ganon's base, where you try to get your sister back for the second time. Only this time it actually works. Look at that. But then Link tries to fight Ganon with his Master Sword that has no power, and Ganon absolutely smacks you around. Tetra is revealed to have a piece of Triforce, and you guys quickly get out of there. He'll take Tetra back down to Hyrule Castle, where she is revealed to be the Princess Zelda herself. Ooh, didn't see that coming. And after this, you go back up to the surface world, or the ocean world, to find your wind and earth sages. They will give you access to the temples that power up your Master Sword, After you do those two, you have to find 8 pieces of Triforce, which make up the Triforce of Courage. You haul ass right back down to Hyrule Castle. Next thing you know, you're fighting Ganon. After a long battle, you stab him in the head. Yep, that's how he goes down in this game. Pretty damn cool, won't lie. But yeah, then you save the day. The game ends with Link and Tetra sailing off in the seas to find a new Hyrule, to start life all over again. Link says, "Fuck you, Grandma," and is to his little sister. He won't ever see him again. That storyline continues in the DS games, in which I have never played, so couldn't tell you about those. I will say the nice thing about this game's story is that you're not really trying to save Zelda, but instead they make it a family matter. You're trying to save your sister. I mean, you have to save Zelda at one point, but it's not really your main focus. And yes, the environment is very different from games before, and even after it, because of this sea extravaganza. Now, there are a few key moments I would like to bring up, because things can just feel a little awkward or a little rushed. The biggest one probably would be that third Pearl of the Goddess. With this pearl, you're just given it pretty much. You just blow up a wall, and the water fish hands it to you. That is like the easiest I've ever got any sort of main quest Zelda item before. That can't be all they planned for it. Also, this one's not really like a big complaint. It's just like, as soon as you get down to Hyrule Castle, they tease you with that whole bridge that goes into the open world, and you're running, right? You're running, you're ready for it, and then boom, right up against a force field. Why do you gotta do that to me, game? I wanna explore. I mean, I get why it leads to Ganon's tower, so, but like, it's kinda missed. And my last one's probably that they try to make Tetra seem like so mysterious, like she's a new character and not in any way associated with Princess Zelda. But I mean, come on. She's a blonde girl who's way too important in the game. Zelda hasn't been seen yet. It's not like any surprise when she has the Triforce. Like, no one's doing that. No one's shocked there. I mean, I even got it given away earlier. I went into a room in the ship and there's like royal family insignia everywhere. Like, they are just feeding it to you. But on to the next thing, the visual flair and style of the game. This one really makes it stand out from all the other entries in the game because wow, is it cartoony. Until recent years, this is the only Zelda game that took this really animated and stylistic look. The closest thing we have to it now are Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Those games' tone is so much more serious, and Wind Waker is not afraid to be lighthearted in certain areas at all. Like, you do get your serious moments, but I mean, come on, look at Link's face. Does that look like a serious man to you? The game's not afraid to lighten the mood. Now, as I mentioned, the game was pretty poorly received by fans, but as of recently, it's been getting the praise it deserves. Going with this cel-shaded look not only helped the game age phenomenally well, but like I mentioned, also helped the characters become so much more expressive. And for Link, a character who doesn't really speak, if at all, in the entirety of the franchise, I feel like this is probably where you see the most feeling come from him. Like, I mean, let's take a look back at Ocarina of Time. There's not a single thought in that brain, is there? It's just smooth like an egg in there. But now with Toon Link's facial expressions, you get a lot more of what he's feeling and all the joy or sadness he gets, or even maybe sometimes fear that takes over himself. It just adds a lot more to your overall experience with Link and to the game. Also, hand in hand with the art style, they take a lot more comedy stabs. Like, probably my most memorable one is Link just slamming against the Tower of Gods at like very high speeds and just flattening, like something you'd see out of Looney Tunes. This wouldn't even be close to something you see happen in either those newer games or a game like Twilight Princess. And yes, even the darker, grittier parts of the game are still very cartoony, but I don't necessarily think that takes away from them. On one hand, obviously Twilight Princess, when it's like trying to be a little creepy, is going to be far more mysterious, eerie, and overall scary than this game could ever be at its finest. But I mean, there's still some points where you can get chills. And you especially get that feeling from Ganon, who has fought Link in the past. He's come back from the Sacred Realm and he is set with a mind on vengeance. But overall, you don't really get a big eerie vibe, and I think that's perfectly fine. Now, the biggest part and appeal to this game has got to be those open seas. Now, there are 49 different sections that make up Hyrule, which is honestly pretty impressive for the GameCube, I won't even lie. And most of them have islands, while other ones kind of have like rock fortresses, which you can get like cool treasure at. And either of these sections house one major island, two smaller islands, or just one small island. And probably the most notable small island for me was the one where you play mini golf on. It was just a really nice change of pace and pretty fun time for a game like this. Swinging your Deku Leaf, getting that nut in the hole. Wait, I will say my favorite, of course, are probably going to be the larger islands, with Windfall being the strongest, but also the smallest. I don't know what it is about these towns in Zelda, but they're always the standouts for me in these games. I just love talking to people while a doom is glooming over them that they're not aware of. Okay, I made that sound a little dark. I just like seeing them do their daily activities and carry on while the world could potentially end in a couple days. Really just helps remind me what I'm fighting for in this world. The other islands all pretty much just home dungeons, besides for Outset Island, Link's home island. The tinier islands all hold some sort of treasure or item that you'll need at some point in your journey. And this map isn't given to you right away. You actually need to explore each individual section and get your chart filled out by a magical fish. Yeah, I did tell you this game was pretty odd, although I feel like that's kind of base for a Zelda game. There are bird and leaf people after all. But each area has its own dedicated magical fish. Supposedly they're all different, but they all look the same and kind of do the same sayings and talk the same. You have to get this 49 times. And they let you know this pretty early in the game, so as you go throughout, you can keep expanding your charts. Although my dumbass just chose to ignore that. Yeah, I severely regretted that decision toward the later half of the game. They even give you some insider info that might even leak a big potential item you need to carry on throughout the game later. And I would say that this is pretty optional, but unfortunately, that's the route I took, and it's not. It makes finding those Triforce charts at the end of the game one of the worst experiences I've ever had. And you have to find 8 of them, as I mentioned. 8. I'll get into that in a minute. But basically, you want to have these charts so you know where to go. And you have these tips that will also help you proceed on where you need to go. And there's a couple of problems I have with the exploration in the open seas. One being that it is so damn slow. I do know that the Wii U version did address this by adding an item called the Swift Sail, which makes sailing across the seas a lot faster, but even I've heard that's too slow, and imagine if you don't have that. You also have to use the windwaker to change your wind direction, which doesn't really sound that bad in practice until you realize you have to do that every single time. Basically, you have to take out your windwaker, play the song at the cadence, listen back to the song you just played, pick a direction you want the wind to go, watch Link watch the wind change to that direction, and then finally whip out your sail. Now, this wouldn't be bad if you only had to do it a couple times in the game, but you probably at least do this 100 to 150 times, and this animation sequence takes like 15 seconds. But overall, I would say these are pretty minor gripes. And they do actually introduce a fast travel once you unlock the bow, which helps tremendously with getting around the seas. But before I got that, I would literally just be like sailing through the ocean and scrolling through my phone. And not that long traversal times are necessarily bad, but the open seas are pretty empty, and the 2 islands you might pass when you are going to your second destination are normally extremely uninteresting, so it doesn't give you a lot to look at, so it's mainly just mindless time of you just sailing. But yeah, nothing detrimental to the game by any means. Like, it doesn't take away enough for it to be like, oh god, this is a pain to explore. Like, I still want to go out and see all the islands there are. Although I will say it was probably the weakest part of the game. There wasn't much to explore, and dungeons and other towns and stuff like that were probably the most fun. I just found myself heading from main island to really just get to the next objective rather than stopping at most parts. Speaking of dungeons, there are 7 of them in Wind Waker, and that's if you include the Forsaken Fortress as one, which I do. And yeah, why don't we start with that one? The Forsaken Fortress is a stealth section, and that is the first thing you do once you get off Outset Island. You lose your weapon immediately, and you have to sneak your way past all the enemies so you don't get locked up, and you're basically trying to make it to your sister at the very top of the tower. From what I've heard, most people don't like how they throw this at you at the very beginning of the game, but honestly, I really enjoyed it. I don't know if it's just because I only got caught one time, so it really didn't take me that long, but I really like that challenge of stealth because it's not something you normally see in the Zelda games. But that's all I really have to say about this one. Only reason it's significant at all is because you can't fight back, and none of the other ones do that. The next one is Dragon Roost Cavern, which is found on the Rito Island. This has a very red and orange color scheme, and yeah, I don't have much to say about this one either. It's pretty easy. It's like a starter Zelda dungeon. But I will say the only time I died in the entire game was at this dungeon's boss fight. Not because it's hard, just because for some reason I couldn't figure out how to kill it during the first life. But after that, you go to the Korok dungeon, which sports that very familiar name, the Forbidden Woods. This one I remember being pretty big, but pretty straightforward, and that those damn airborne enemies were the most annoying thing ever until you got the boomerang. That's really it though. Easy boss, just go on to the next. And then once you get those 3 pearls, you go into the Tower of the Gods. I don't know if I genuinely really thought this one was interesting or if I just like the aesthetics of it, but it's got some cool puzzles with some like water changing effects. I would say it's a good time. Might also help that you get the Master Sword at the end of it. And yeah, it does unlock the kind of sacred grounds, being Hyrule Castle below the water, so that concept probably carries it a lot because that's really cool itself. And after this come the Earth and Wind Temple. I will have to give the edge to the Earth Temple on this one. This dungeon was huge, and it brought back a lot of those exploration aspects that you would see in those prior Zelda games. And it had a way better boss than the Wind Temple. Like seriously, the hardest thing about that one was literally just hitting the ghosts. Though, I did enjoy the light puzzles in this one, so I was still rated as a good time. And the last one is Ganon's Tower, which makes you fight all of the bosses all over again, but this time with no color. After that, you'll head on to a pretty challenging boss fight, that being Puppet Ganon. I don't know if it was really that hard, but the little like wormy thing at the end was just so hard for me to hit for some reason with the bow. So that was the thing that took the most effort. But after that, you climb up to the top and then get tossed by Ganon. The king will like put his hand on the Triforce and be like, "Oh, give the children power." And then you come back and you're energized, and yeah, you stab Ganon in the head. Still not getting over that. That is sick as hell. Why is it in the cartooniest game though? My favorite definitely has to be the Earth Temple though. It's just kind of stomps everything else and it's not really even close. The other dungeons were fun, but they just didn't leave it with that same feeling. I also don't really remember all too much from them when everything's said and done. So this game cleaned up phenomenally well compared to the N64 games. Like obviously the graphical upgrade is gonna be crazy. I mean, this is one of the biggest jumps that we had in gaming history, but the controls are just so much more tight and responsive. Just buttery perfect. I was playing Zelda Ocarina of Time with my roommate. At the same time I was playing through Wind Waker by myself. God, there is a very noticeable difference. Like I feel like even just the ability to change the camera with the C stick would be enough, but oh my god, they made everything else feel so much better. The combat feels nice and responsive. There's way more swings and stabs you can do, and the game is just a lot more user-friendly. Although I can't judge Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time so much because, well, they were inventing something that a lot of games have copied off of now, so this was really just a polishing round. It's a big difference, so I did want to point it out. In your combat here, it's pretty standard stuff, all the same Zelda things, but now you can actually parry, but they made it like the easiest thing ever. Like they put a huge green button in your screen and expect you to miss it, and it's just like a free hit. It's literally like the size of one of those pop-up ads you'd see on your phone after you're like done playing Candy Crush or something. Yeah, no, it's impossible to miss. And other than that, the game doesn't really add challenge in specific enemies, but just throws hordes of them at you. So it's more like difficulty by quantity. It just kind of overwhelms you. So altogether, not very strategy based. Still fun. But like I said, I did only die one time in this game, so it's not that hard by any means compared to the other ones. Other than that, Z targeting still stays a staple in the franchise. It's in pretty much every game after Ocarina of Time pioneered it, and you get your pretty standard quest items throughout your adventure to use in combat. And yeah, now we've reached the point where I'm gonna complain about the most annoying thing ever. This is just gonna be like a huge rant session. The damn Triforce pieces. Real quick, I do want to touch on that the remake did make this better. It's still not great, but they did make this a lot less tedious. This quest is nothing short than obnoxious. So the premise of the quest here is you gotta find 8 different pieces of the Triforce that make up the Triforce of Courage. Sounds pretty cool in concept, right? They're all scattered around Hyrule and you gotta do some exploring to find them. But that's where things start actually going downhill. First off, you get a treasure chart, which tells you where the charts are to find the Triforce pieces. Yes, you heard me right. You have to find a chart to find the charts to find the Triforce. And like I said, there are 8 pieces of Triforce. And with those charts that you have to find now, you're looking for 16 different items. 16! Not to mention that after you find the 8 Triforce charts, you have to get them deciphered by Tingle on Tingle Island for 398 rupees. 400 rupees. You have to get like 2 wallet upgrades. I think you can't even still get all the rupees in one go if you want to do that. And I won't even lie, I used a guide for this. I could not even imagine if I didn't how long that would have taken me. It still took me like a solid 8 hours with the guide. But I hated this quest with all of my heart, but it is the only one that really annoyed me. It just sucks that it's one of the last things you do in the game. At that point, I was already invested and I was like ready to fight Ganon, and then they throw that bone at me and I'm like, well, That sucks. Yeah, I hated that. Now, there's still a lot of things I did not touch on when it comes to the game, and I incentivize you to check it out if you haven't already. Now, the game doesn't have a cheap price tag by any means for the GameCube version. It comes around at like 80 bucks, which I think is what I got it for. And actually, the HD remake tends to be cheaper, and some would say look better. There's also ways around those price tags. But either way, Wind Waker is a really good time, and I really did enjoy it. It's personally my favorite game on the GameCube, but I also haven't played Twilight Princess yet, so I plan on doing that soon, so there's a chance that would probably maybe take over Wind Waker for me. Overall though, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker is nothing short of a good time. I would say definitely holds up today, and will probably do so for years to come.